Greetings to all and shalom. Welcome to Facebook Live. My name is Magda Brown and I am a Holocaust survivor. And today I will share my testimony during those difficult times. I was born and raised in Hungary and I had a happy-go childhood just like any other youngsters. And matter of fact, I was a spoiled child. I was the youngest in the family, and I had a brother who was 5 years older, and my parents were wonderful, loving people, and they owned a meat market, and they tried to make a living for us to have all the comforts that a youngster needs. So all these things were going fine, and then things were turned upside down. Uh, Hitler came to power in 1933. He created many anti-Jewish laws, and that affected our life in Hungary as well. So what did that all mean? First of all, there were these anti-Jewish laws with many, many restrictions. Professionals could no longer work in government facilities. They couldn't belong to their professional organizations. And then it continued on to the little people, like a barber or a tailor could not receive a license to practice their profession. Now, that translates to poverty because they couldn't support their families. So in the early days, the Jewish organizations within each community were able to help the people in need. But unfortunately, that didn't last too long. So on March 1944, the Nazis invaded Hungary. And from that moment on, everything fell apart. And to explain this chronologically, I'm going to show you a picture of the Jewish star. We were given an order to sew it on our clothing. Without that, we were not permitted to go out anywhere. And ironically, even little children had to wear this Star of David. They had no idea why, but that was labeling or discrimination, if you can call it any terminology. It all still meant demeaning our people. So once that was established, then everything went the extreme expediency. So one week we got this order for wearing the Jewish star. The second week comes the order that all the Jewish people will be incarcerated in a ghetto. To further explain a ghetto, in America we understand it is a location where people of different backgrounds try to live together. So they merge into a community called a ghetto. But in the Holocaust era, a ghetto meant that you had to give up your home, walk out of your home with a little overnight bag, and were taken to the unknown. In my case, when this was happening, they ordered us to pack our little belonging, and they marched us on foot to the end of the city where they had a brickyard. And we couldn't understand, am I skipping something?
Yeah.
What did I leave out?
More about the ghetto, about your home.
Oh. So how can we
It's okay, you're still live, so just keep talking.
Okay, well, anyhow,
40 people.
When they designated the people to be in a ghetto, as it happened, the area where that was to be was the place where my home was. So now the people were coming to my home. To describe the conditions is like this. My parents, my brother and I, and an aunt and uncle, totaling 6 people, lived in that home. It was a comfortable home for our family. Now the police was bringing in the people from the surrounding areas, and my home became the residency of 40 people. You cannot fathom what crowded conditions can create of the people. There were people who were quiet. They were the ones who were praying. The other ones were kind of cursing. And other ones were hurting with different ailments. But it was like the Tower of Babel. It was chaos beyond unimaginable form. So now these people are trying to find a little corner in that house to put their tired body down and just relax. Once the people were incarcerated in the ghetto, they were no longer out. You were not able to go even to a pharmacy or to a doctor, anything. Once you were in the ghetto, you were locked in. Food was very scarce. Fortunately, my father being in the meat business, in those days they used to smoke meat because it doesn't require refrigeration. So therefore, we had some meat storage in our attic, so we were able to help the people who lived in our home. So now we are living in this ghetto situation for March until the end of May. So just a couple of weeks compared to in the other countries, for instance, like Poland, who were troubled since 1939 to 44. So their ghetto life was a totally different story. Anyhow, so now we are in the ghetto, and we get the order that we are going to be taken to another country because they need laborers. So that was a very sound order, because we figured this is the height of war, and it makes sense for them to say that they need laborers. But that was the 20th century's biggest lie. So now they took us to the other end of the town, which was a brickyard. The brickyard is a brickyard. There's nothing in there. There's no furniture. There's no bathroom. There's no water. Nothing. Just bricks. But you see, everything was very cleverly figured out, because in the brickyard we were close to the railroad tracks. And on my 17th birthday, on June 11, 1944, they crowded us into a cattle car, which looks like any kind of cattle car. Matter of fact, I have a picture of me in front of a cattle car that is placed at the Illinois Holocaust Museum in Skokie, Illinois. And now when you look inside, you would imagine there are maybe 30 people who could fit in there. But they crowded in as many as 70, 75 human beings. You cannot fathom what crowded conditions can be. There was 10, in order to allow my parents to sit on the wooden floor, I stood for 3 continuous days. When we boarded this cattle car, there were 2 buckets in the corner. One was filled with water, one for toilet reasons. Except that water was never refilled for 3 continuous days. Next to other ailments in life, the worst is thirst. You cannot fathom how to exist without water for 3 continuous days. This is already June. It is hot. It is even warmer inside the crowded cattle car. So now we are traveling, and the train is crossing the Carpathian Mountains that separates Hungary from Slovakia. And I look out in the distance, there was like a tiny little window that I could look out on. And in the distance, I see a shepherd. And I think to myself, in my deranged head, I imagined, how come he's there and I am here? I thought the entire world was in a cattle car. So the train continues, and now it stops after 3 days. They open the gates, and we get out of the car, and some men speaking a different language, wearing striped uniforms, are greeting us, and they try to tell us to leave our little overnight bag in the car. We will get it later. Later never comes. The last stitch of clothing or personal belonging, like a photo, is gone forever. So now we are out in an open field, and they order us that the men has to go in one column and women and children in another column. So that's the last time I see my dear father and any of the male relatives. And now the women and children are lined up, and we are faced by a group of Nazi officers who are not talking to us. We are not human beings anymore. They just point at us to give orders. So now I am lined up with my dear mother, and she's holding on to me. And this officer points his finger at us and just does like this way to my mother and that way for me. So as we are parting from each other, I wave to my mother and I say, okay, mother, I'll see you later. Unfortunately, later never comes. So now our life begins, and we find out that we are in an Auschwitz concentration camp in Poland. We have really never heard about concentration camps when we were in Hungary, so everything is brand new. So now I am shifted to a different area, and we are going into a building. And there we get the order that we're going to have a shower. Okay. And then from the adjacent room, there are some girls coming out screaming from the top of their lungs. And they look so funny. Well, what has happened? In that room, they shaved our hair bald and all our body hair. And if that's not bad enough, they sprayed disinfectant on the freshly shaven skin. Now remember, I am 17 and my friends are mostly in the teen years. And what does a teenager do but fix her hair? And now we look unrecognizable. Matter of fact, it took several hours. We figured out a way of looking into the friend's eyes and listening to the voice, the sound. And that's how we recognize one another. So now, from here, we had what they call the shower is really a laughable thing, because it was nothing but a trickle of water that reached our smelly body, and there was no soap, there was no towel. So nevertheless, this is finished, and now it comes bedtime. And this is a big room, big empty room. There's absolutely nothing in the room but floor and windows. So now we are selected to a group of 500 girls. And they take us into this room. And the capacity of the room for people to lie down on the floor would be maybe 250, 300. 500 were laying on the floor. There were layers of 100 in a row, and By the way, they took our shoes away as well, but they gave us some wooden flip-flops. It was just a piece of wood on the sole of the foot, and then a leather band was holding the shoe on. It was very uncomfortable to learn to walk in it, but anyhow, we used this flip-flop to become our pillow, and the body heat next to us was our blanket. And then an older prisoner have been assigned to be our supervisor. And her job was to get us ready to, when it was feeding time or selection time, a variety of reasons. So it was very, very difficult to sleep. In the morning, it came eating time. And the first morning, they gave us some unrecognizable cereal or something. I have no idea what it was, but it smelled bad. It tasted horrible. So the first day we pulled up our noses and wouldn't eat it. But the second day we realized if we don't eat that, we have nothing else. So you'll be surprised when you're very hungry, you eat anything. So this was the routine. And then we had the whole day of standing around in an open field within the camp. There wasn't a shade anywhere. There wasn't a tree or anything. And this is already summer. Many of our light-skinned girls got sunburns in the worst way. And just going to the designated area. Matter of fact, one time I noticed my best childhood friend in the other section of the camp. And I ran over, crossing the barrier where I was supposed to be, and the Nazi woman guard caught me and slapped me on the face that I just got knocked down. Now, I was a spoiled little girl. I was never spanked. So it was a more than physically painful experience. We had, during the day, there were what they called selections. So we had, they were looking for the upper part of our body to see how strong we are, so we can be ready for some labor. And the other ones disappeared. We were there for about a couple of days when we kept asking the old-timers, could you please tell us how soon we're going to see our parents? And they pointed their hands to the 5 chimneys that were spewing out some dark smoke, and it had a terrible odor, a burning odor, like when you kill a chicken and put it over a flame to remove the feather. But who could imagine that, unfortunately, those were the gas chambers where they exterminated millions of people. So this life was taking place for about 3 months or so. And then one day, like I said, we were having these selections all day long. People were selected, and some were leaving the camp, and some were disappearing for life. Anyhow, I was lucky enough to be selected with 1,000 Hungarian Jewish women, and we were taken out of Auschwitz and back on the cattle car, traveling now from Poland into Germany, where an ammunition factory was in the general vicinity of between Frankfurt and Marburg. Now, we were teenage girls, the majority of us, and therefore we have been just out of school, so we have never seen a factory, let alone work in a factory. But you'd be surprised how fast you learn. The factory manufactured rockets and bombs. And we had different work locations. My job was, in front of me was a bomb. A bomb is about this long, and it has a hole at the neck of it. And there were pipelines with some liquid poison material carrying around the factory. And then this pipe came to my hand. I inserted the liquid and then locked the neck of it and moved on to another department. It was extremely heavy work, and the hours were 12-hour shifts, either 12 hours day shift or 12-hour night shift. We had like a half hour as a lunch break, except there was a very little lunch, maybe a crust of bread. And this work situation went on. But, you know, I am a great believer that there are more good people than bad people. I will never forget the kindness of an old man supervisor, a German man. You see, they had the other young men who soldiers in Germany were young men were in the war. So they brought in old people to do supervisory work. And this old man was like maybe 70 years old, and I am a 17-year-old kid. And I spoke German fluently, so we could communicate. And forever I am grateful to him for his kindness, for sneaking in green apples from his yard. Don't forget, he had to be careful that the Nazi guard shouldn't catch him, because he got into trouble. But nevertheless, I have to mention that in all the atrocities, that there are still good people in this world. So we had, then what happened was, now we are into about maybe 6 months or thereabouts working, and our shaven hair now starts growing out, except something shocking happened. While our hair was black in the past, now it's orange. Our face and hands are lemon yellow, and our lips are deep dark purple. What has taken place? The poisonous material started affecting our system. And if this tragedy would have continued much longer, I wouldn't have the pleasure of telling my story. So we are going into the early spring of 1945. The Allies are closing in, and now the Nazis want to move us further into German territory. So all of a sudden we get the order that we're leaving the camp. It was the end of March of 1945, and I had a very thin little spring coat, no underwear, no socks, none of those luxuries. And we had to go on the open highway for 3 solid days and sleeping on the wooden floor in the ditches. So as we approach about the 3rd day, notice that there are less Nazi guards escorting us as when we started out. So now bravery and fantasy comes into big time. We are standing in front of a wheat field, and in the distance, maybe 2 blocks in or so, we see a barn. And a group of us are standing there and start fantasizing. How would it be if during the night, without any body noticing us, crawling into this barn and see what happens? You see, our self-esteem was 0 by this time. So what? They find us, they kill us, it will be all over. But evidently the good Lord had other plans for us, because we made it to the barn and shivering there all night long. The next morning, we look out the little peephole and we see 2 young men coming towards us, but they're wearing a different uniform. Well, it turned out that they were scouts from the 6th Armored Division of the United States. God bless them all for risking their lives for saving ours. So they were our saviors, and this is how we got liberated. And now there was an American organization during the war called UNRRA, UNRRA, and they were helping war-torn countries and help. So through their services, we were fed, and the captain of the army went into German villages, talking to the mayors, asking him if he could arrange with the town folks to give one room in a home for the girls so they can wash and sleep in a bed. So this is how I ended up with a nice German family in a village. And your language skill really came handy because I could talk with them, and so now the behavior between the enemy and the good guys just diminished. We were just two people. Be grateful for the family for giving us their homes. All this was taking place from end of March until about the middle of summer. We are still in this German village and really don't know anything about what happened to the rest of the family and or what our next move will be. And a miracle happened in a way, because two young Jewish boys were from Hungary. They were combing the area looking for relatives. And one of the boys happened to be my brother's childhood boyfriend. And he said, I have good news for you, I have bad news for you. Yes, your brother Michael is alive. The bad news is he was captured by the Russian army and he is in Siberia in prison. Okay, so at least I knew that he was alive. I had a chance to go back to Hungary and just look for more relatives. And I went into my home that my grandfather built. Okay, so it was my property. And some people were living there. And I said, just give me a little room, I don't plan on staying here, but just so I can rest here. And the answer was, the government gave us this property and you cannot stay here. But here I was lucky again, because I had a much, much older cousin who was by that time married, and he and his wife took me in. And in the interim, I was able to get in touch with my United States relatives, and interestingly, when I was interviewed about that, the only thing I knew was my father had two brothers and a sister who emigrated to the United States, Chicago, 1908. That's it. Of course, this is before the high-tech era, so tracing is not as simple. But nevertheless, the interviewer related this information to the Hebrew Immigrant Society in New York, and through their very capable volunteers, they kept searching and they made contacts with my relatives, who were elated hearing about me and offered their help. So with their help and their financial aid, I was kind of put on front of the list, and I got on the ship in Bremenhaven and had 10 days of horrible travel on the ocean, because I can't handle it. So I had to feed the fishes. But nevertheless, I arrived in New York, and some more volunteers escorted me to the train station, put me on a train on the way to Chicago. In September of 1946, I was welcomed by my relatives. My Americanization was much faster than the average refugee would have it, because both my uncles had daughters my age, and when you are 18, 19 years old, you learn very fast. So it helped me a great deal. I made many friends, and I even had the good fortune of finding a nice Jewish boy of American birth who married me. I'm proud to say that we had two lovely children, a boy and a girl, and they are now presenting us with fantastic grandchildren. So I beat the tragedy, and I am proud to be an American citizen, a grandma, and a Holocaust survivor speaker for the Illinois Holocaust Museum. I would like to quote, yes.
Do you have 3 messages? 3 messages.
Oh, I'm coming to that. Okay, so when I speak at different venues, I quote President Eisenhower's remarks when he liberated many of the concentration camps in Germany. And these were his exact words. Quote, "I have never felt able to describe my emotional reaction when I first came face to face with indisputable evidence of Nazi brutality and ruthless disregard of every shred of decency. I visited every nook and cranny of the camp because I felt it my duty to be in a position from then on to testify at first hand about these things in case there ever grew up at home the belief or assumption that the stories of Nazi brutality were just propaganda." Matter of fact, when I conclude my presentations at schools, I leave them with 3 messages. One is, protect your freedom. Freedom is a very precious commodity, and slavery is tragedy beyond description. Second, think before you hate. All genocide stems from hatred. So I'm not telling you to hate or not to hate. That's up to your conscience. But at least think about it. And thirdly, every so often there are deniers of the Holocaust. I mean, this is, in today's modern technology, it is a laughable matter. And on top of it, the actual Buchenwald concentration camp is still intact and on display for visitors. So how can it be a fantasy? Matter of fact, I had the good fortune last year to speak at Buchenwald concentration camp's 75th anniversary of liberation. Anyhow, I would like to share about, in reference to the freedom, Maya Angelou comment about freedom. Freedom is a fragile thing and is never more than 1 generation away from extinction. They must be fought for and defended every day. And I would like to share with you one more little poem that my fellow Hungarian survivor wrote many years ago. And it says, "Scapegoats Again" by Ivo Gross. Hitler never died. He only slumbers. If, in any generation, at some part of the globe, a nation sinks into a slump, those with the loudest voice search for a scapegoat. Hitler awakens, wearing a different suit, shouting in a different language, but carries the same message of hate. Camouflage their shortcomings, the people are pleased to follow him. Thank you again for tuning in, and join here next week, Wednesday, at 10 a.m. to hear Holocaust survivor Steen Metz share his story. Please keep an eye on Illinois Holocaust Museum's Facebook and other social media accounts, where we will post a stream of content through the week ahead. Thank you for your support. during these extraordinary times. Goodbye.
Magda, you do have some questions.
Yes, I would love to have some.
Courtney asks, how did people react when you first came to America and they learned you had been in the camps?
Well, when I first came to America, and I could talk already, I talked very little about the bad times, because I was enjoying the happy moments of freedom and love and family. However, I never forgot one episode that kind of hit me in the wrong way. Somehow or another, I was in a group, and one lady asked me, "So what was in during the war?" And I start telling my story. Just I am into maybe a few minutes when she turns to me and said the following: "You know, my dear, we had it pretty hard in this country too. We were on ration, our boys were in the service. The point here is she could not understand the depth of our tragedy." So I not only I, but we survivors kind of didn't talk too much about that. We tried to reconnect a new life and build a family and get jobs. So, I mean, there are a lot of things to assimilate into a new world. So therefore, we just kept going ahead. And then about 25 or so years ago, by that time I wasn't working anymore, I got acquainted with the Illinois Holocaust Museum and Educational Center, and the director, Miss Saney, says, "Oh, you're a survivor. Join us and be part of our Speakers Bureau." So since that time, I have covered hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of schools. Matter of fact, I am proud to say that about 10 years ago, I was invited to the annual Catholic Eucharistic Convention in Auckland, New Zealand. And I had an opportunity to talk to different groups in the churches, in schools in that area. So it continues on, and the other survivors are being good speakers as well. So matter of fact, at this particular week, I had already 8 different reservations to different schools, but unfortunately, to current conditions, we don't know if I can fulfill that requirement.
Tim asks, can you describe meeting the soldiers and what it was like talking to them?
Well, meeting the soldiers was, let me put it this way. When we first met each other, they were crying and we were crying. That was number one. Number two, those soldiers were as old as we were, because this is wartime and 18-year-old boys were entering the service. So maybe the 2 boys were like 19 years old. So we're pretty close in age. And it was the 6th Armored Division that I found out later from my friends who spoke English. But I never had the opportunity to visit with them, those 2 people. But what has happened, the army base was right in the same town where we were located. And we were invited to dances. So it got to be a very nice social interaction. As a matter of fact, my very dearest friend met a nice American soldier. They married and lived a happy life together. So there were a lot of love stories too as well.
Carla asks, did you see your brother again?
My dear brother is a story by itself. I am just ready to make arrangements to come to America when I hear the story about that my brother is alive. And now I am in a quandary what to do. Do I remain in Europe and wait until he is released from the Russian prison? After all, the war is over already. Or leave for America. And I am, like I said, I'm an 18-year-old kid, and I have to make by myself executive decision. So I mulled over this for quite a few days, and finally I decided I better go while the opportunity is here. And then I arrived in America, got settled in, and it has taken 3 more years when I received a letter, a handwritten letter from my brother from Hungary. He was released from Russian prison from Siberia, but unfortunately he came back, he contracted malaria. Now you ask, how can anybody get malaria in Siberia? Well, he was working in a paper mill, and they had to go during the summer into the swamps to cut down trees. And evidently a mosquito bit him and affected the illness. So anyhow, so I had this letter from Hungary. He's back and he is not feeling well. But fortunately, by that time, I was employed by a physician and I was able to purchase quinine, which he couldn't get in Hungary, so close after the war. And we were able to ship quinine for him, which the doctor gave him, and he got well. So now came another tragedy. Because the United States was in a Cold War with the Russians, Hungary was occupied by the Russians. Therefore, it took me 20 years until finally he could get into the States. And that came by the miracle of God, because there was a special mission by the Israelis arranged with the Hungarians that people who want to emigrate to Israel, there was some negotiation where the people could leave Hungary. So my brother left Hungary, and he had friends who were living in Italy. And the Italian friends said to him, when you are on the train on the way to Israel, get off in Italy, and we are going to meet you at the train and just take your luggage and everything. So because for him to connect with America was much simpler than it would have been the other way. So nevertheless, we managed to get him into America 1962. And as talkative as I am, he was very quiet, but a million times more intelligent. He was a great fan of all the baseball games and football games and all that. So he could converse with, matter of fact, there was a beautiful episode. I spoke in Springfield, Illinois, which is the capital of Illinois. And the governor was Governor Quinn, and he was present in my presentation. And I introduced my brother to the governor. So the governor says, "Oh, where do you live?" So he said, "I live in Cleveland," he said. From that moment on, I lost the two guys because the governor kept asking him about the Cleveland Indians, and the two men were talking like they knew each other forever. So he was with us till 2010 when he passed away.
So that was 19 years since you had seen him last?
Yeah.
Sue asks, how did you find out your parents were gone?
Well, that didn't take too big of a talent because after the war we started hearing a lot more. And also when I go back to my statement in Auschwitz proper, when those selections were taking place and we asked the old-timers, where are the people who went the other way? And both my mother and father went the other way. Mm-hmm. So, you see things, you hear things. It's very hard to accept, but unfortunately by that time, even while we were still in Auschwitz, we knew what was happening.
Courtney says, do you have any family photos, heirlooms, or items from before the war?
Yes, matter of fact, I do, and that's thanks to my American relatives. Matter of fact, that's how I have my teenage picture, and when this teenage picture, now how would I have a teenage picture when I lost everything? I came to America, and just like any other parent, when I was a baby, and you know how you send photos to the relatives. So my parents did the same thing. And my dear Auntie Pearl in Chicago, was kind enough to give me all the photos that they accumulated during the years. So I have a picture of my mother and father in their business, and I have a picture of this one, and I have a baby picture as well. So matter of fact, the baby picture appears on my website on gmagda1.com.
MagdaBrown.com.
No, MagdaBrown.com, sorry. MagdaBrown.com. And thanks to my very high-tech family, because they created this website.
And it links back to the Illinois Museum.
And what?
And it connects back to the Illinois Holocaust Museum.
And it connects back at the Holocaust Museum.
Courtney also asks, are you hopeful there will be an end to anti-Semitism attacks and hate crimes? What can we do to stop them?
This is a $10 billion question.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, with the influx of high-tech knowledge, anti-Semitism is spreading much faster than in the past. Now, how can we prevent ourselves? I wish I was a fortune teller. I am a very positive person that I always try to look at the good things of life. Let's continue trying to produce quality stuff among the Jewish community, and we will excel and rise above.
Alrighty. And if a teacher wants to have you come to their school once schools are back in session, how do they contact you?
It's very, very simple. You contact the Illinois Holocaust Museum Speakers Bureau, and then they are in touch with me, make all the arrangements. And once I say, yes, I am free that day, then I start communicating with the teacher direct to make arrangement time-wise. And my presentation of the actual detailed story takes approximately 45 minutes. And then I need time for questions, because the questions are the most important part of the entire presentation.
All right, and our last question, Courtney asks, how do you remain so positive?
How do I remain so positive? Because the cup is always full, the cup is always full, and you have to believe in it. I have a little mantra that I want to share with all of you. And that is, you have to have faith, fantasy, drive, determination, and hope that tomorrow will be better.
All right.
Well,
thank you for sharing.
You're welcome. Thank you for tuning in. Join us here next Wednesday at 10 a.m. to hear Holocaust survivor Steen Metz share his story. Please keep an eye on the Illinois Holocaust Museum's Facebook and other social media accounts, where we will post a stream of content through the weeks ahead. Thank you for your support during these extraordinary times. Goodbye.
What do you always send off with? Sending grandma hugs.
Oh, grandma hugs. Lots of grandma hugs for everybody.
Lots of comments of grandma hugs and Magdas. All right.
I've done better than this.